My name is Walter Bennett. I'm 71 years old, and I live in the Alameda neighborhood of Northeast Portland, Oregon. For more than 40 years, I built and ran one of the toughest commercial construction companies in the Pacific Northwest, and I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal a man could see on a job site. I was wrong. The worst betrayal of my life did not come from a crooked supplier or a lying subcontractor. It came from my own son, delivered in a single text message at 6 o'clock on a gray Tuesday morning. The message read, "Dad, plans changed. You're not coming on the cruise next week. Vanessa wants just family there." Within 48 hours of receiving that text, I had emptied the bank accounts, revoked the trust, and sold the $2.2 million house they lived in to a cash buyer with a demolition crew on standby. By the time my son and his wife stepped off their luxury cruise ship 10 days later, the home they believed they owned had been stripped down to the bare wooden studs, and everything they had ever owned was sitting on the curb in black garbage bags, under a hand-painted cardboard sign that said, "Free to take." Before I walk you through exactly how I dismantled their perfect little lives, piece by careful piece, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And if you've ever had to teach an entitled family member a hard lesson about gratitude, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, because stories like this one are exactly why my channel exists. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. It was a Tuesday, 6 in the morning. The Portland sky outside my kitchen window was that heavy, wet gray that settles over the Willamette Valley for months at a time and refuses to leave. I was sitting at my kitchen table nursing a black coffee, the way I have every morning for 50 years. The house was quiet. It had been painfully quiet for 3 years, ever since my wife Eleanor passed away. Some mornings I still caught myself setting out 2 mugs instead of 1. That morning I was staring at the empty chair across from me, thinking about her, when my phone buzzed against the cold granite countertop. It was a text from Nathan, my 35-year-old son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders across freshly poured foundations, the man whose private college tuition I had paid in full, in cash, without ever once mentioning the number to him. I picked up the phone expecting a simple question about our upcoming trip. Maybe something about flight times, or luggage tags, or whether I'd remembered to pack the framed photograph of his mother that I'd promised to bring aboard. Instead, the words on that glowing screen hit me like a steel beam swinging loose from a crane. "Dad, plans changed. You're not coming on the cruise next week. Vanessa wants just family there." I sat there in the dim light of the kitchen and read the message over and over, trying to force the letters to mean something else. "You're not coming on the cruise. Vanessa wants just family there. Just family." As if I, the man who had paid for every square inch of their lives, were some distant acquaintance who had wandered too close to the guest list. Let me give you the context you need to understand exactly what I was looking at, because this was not some cheap weekend getaway that could be rebooked with an apology. This was a 10-day ultra-luxury Alaskan cruise. I had paid exactly $45,000 for it, every cent charged to my personal platinum card. I never asked my son or his wife for a single dime, and I never would have. I paid for it because I wanted to honor Eleanor. Alaska was the one place my wife had always dreamed of seeing. The glaciers, the whales, the endless green coastline. We never made it because I was always working, always building, always pouring every ounce of myself into securing a financial future for Nathan. When Eleanor died, I stood beside her grave and made her a quiet promise. I would take our son to Alaska, and we would celebrate her birthday on the water she never got to see. So I booked the owner's suite, the finest accommodation on the entire ship. A sprawling 2-story suite with panoramic ocean views, a private balcony wide enough to host a dinner party, and around-the-clock personal butler service. I prepaid helicopter tours over the glaciers. I prepaid the premium dining, the excursions, everything. I booked it for the 3 of us, me, Nathan, and his 32-year-old wife, Vanessa. I wanted us together. I wanted to stand at that railing with my son as the ice field slid past, and tell him about the woman his mother had been before he was old enough to remember. And now my son was sending me a coward's text message at 6 in the morning, casually uninviting me from my own $45,000 gift, because his wife wanted just family there. A cold, heavy silence filled my kitchen. I set my coffee mug down. My hands, I noticed, were perfectly steady. When you spend 4 decades running construction sites, dealing with corrupt suppliers, lazy foremen, and inspectors with their hands out, You learn very quickly that anger is a useless emotion. Anger gets men hurt. You don't throw a tantrum when a foundation cracks. You fix the problem. I tapped Nathan's name and hit the call button. The line rang once, twice, and went dead. He had rejected the call. My own son, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the man whose wedding I had paid for down to the last centerpiece, was too much of a coward to hear my voice. Nathan had always been soft in a way that worried his mother more than it worried me. I used to tell Eleanor he'd toughen up with age. Instead, he had traded her firm, loving guidance for Vanessa's quiet, absolute control. I took one deep, steadying breath and dialed a second time. This time someone answered, but it was not Nathan. "Hello, Walter." It was Vanessa. Her voice was hushed and tightly managed, coated in that fake, polished politeness she always deployed right before saying something poisonous. She did not call me Dad. She almost never did. I kept my voice level, hiding the storm building behind my ribs. "Put my son on the phone, Vanessa." She let out a small theatrical sigh, the sigh of a woman inconvenienced by furniture. "Nathan's in the shower right now, Walter. And honestly, there's nothing to discuss. He sent you the text. The plans have changed." I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the bleak sky. "Vanessa," I said slowly, choosing each word the way I used to choose load-bearing steel, "that is a $45,000 trip. I booked the owner's suite so we could celebrate Eleanor. You do not change the plans and uninvite the man who paid for every ticket." I could hear her shifting on the other end. Faintly, in the background, I could hear running water, proof that Nathan was hiding behind a bathroom door while his wife did his dirty work. Then she delivered the words that shattered whatever fragile illusion of family we had left. "Look, Walter," she whispered, her tone hardening into something condescending and cold. "My parents have never been on a luxury vacation in their entire lives. They deserve this experience. My brother Tyler is coming too. And let's be honest here, older people like you get seasick so easily. You're a liability out on the water. You'd just be tired and complaining the whole time. My parents are in much better shape to actually enjoy that suite." I closed my eyes. The audacity of this woman was staggering. She was hijacking my gift, my money, and my tribute to my dead wife, and converting it into a free luxury vacation for her own parents and her unemployed brother, people who had never contributed so much as a tank of gas to anyone's life, least of all mine. I stayed utterly silent on the line, letting her words hang in the empty air of my kitchen. And Vanessa made the single greatest miscalculation of her life. She mistook my silence for surrender. She thought she was dealing with a tired, lonely, half-broken old man who would swallow any disrespect because he was starving for family connection. "We'll bring you back some nice souvenirs from the ports, Walter," she added, her voice dripping with artificial pity. "Just stay home. Relax, enjoy the quiet, we'll see you when we get back." And before I could say a single word, she ended the call. I stood in that dark kitchen for a long minute, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. Vanessa's voice still echoing in my head. "Older people like you get seasick so easily. You'd just be tired and complaining the whole time." A different man might have screamed. A different man might have hurled his coffee mug at the wall and called back 20 times demanding a tearful explanation. I did none of those things. 40 years of running a commercial construction business teaches you to process betrayal differently. When a foundation cracks, you don't cry over the concrete. You pull the blueprints, you trace the failure to its source, and you tear out the rot with unforgiving precision. I walked down the hall to my study, sat down at my heavy mahogany desk, and opened my laptop. I needed to see the exact scope of the damage for myself. I found the original booking confirmation in my email. $45,000. Charged to my platinum card. I remembered the day I booked it, sitting in this very chair, looking at the framed photograph of Eleanor smiling on the Oregon coast, feeling for the first time in years like a man with a purpose. I copied the booking reference, opened the cruise line's passenger portal, and logged in. My hands did not shake. The reservation page loaded, and I leaned toward the screen, scanning the passenger manifest, expecting to see my own name, Walter Bennett, primary account holder, lead passenger, printed at the top. My name was gone, not moved to a smaller cabin, not downgraded, erased, surgically removed from the entire reservation. And in the space where my name should have been, occupying the master bedroom of the owner's suite that my calloused hands had paid for, were two names I knew all too well: Roger Cole, Carol Cole, Vanessa's parents. The same people who had spent 5 years of Thanksgiving dinners making thinly veiled comments about my blue-collar money and glancing at the calluses on my hands like they were something contagious, were now listed as the primary occupants of a $45,000 suite I had personally financed. A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I forced myself to keep scrolling. 2 more passengers, Nathan Bennett and Vanessa Bennett. That made 4. The owner's suite slept 6 comfortably. I looked at the final passenger slot, the slot that should have carried my name, and there it was, Tyler Cole. Tyler. Vanessa's 33-year-old brother. A man who had dropped out of 2 community colleges, been fired from 3 entry-level jobs that I had personally arranged for him as favors, and who currently lived rent-free in his parents' basement, playing video games 18 hours a day. This grown man, who had never once bought me so much as a cup of gas station coffee, was now registered to enjoy the private balcony, the butler service, and the premium dining packages that 4 decades of my sweat had purchased. They hadn't merely uninvited me. That alone would have been cruel. They had logged into my private account, hijacked my paid reservation, and replaced me with the entire Cole family. They had stolen a dead woman's memorial and converted it into a free vacation for people who despised me. And there was more. I scrolled to the onboard spending section and saw that Tyler had already gone into the system and upgraded his personal beverage package to the highest available tier. Unlimited top-shelf liquor for 10 days. Every one of those charges was linked to my Platinum card, which was still stored in the ship's system as the default payment method for all onboard expenses. They thought they had won. Vanessa had sized me up and decided I was a broken old widower who would quietly absorb the disrespect and stay out of the way. She did not understand who she was dealing with. You do not survive 40 years in commercial contracting by letting people walk off your site with your materials. You do not build skyscrapers by letting parasites drain your accounts without consequence. I was still sitting there, tracing their names on the screen with my cursor, when my phone rang. It was Nathan. Apparently he had finally finished his shower. I answered calmly. "Hello, son. Dad, hey." His voice had that rehearsed, too smooth quality I remembered from every childhood lie he ever told me. "Listen, I know the text this morning probably came off wrong. I want to explain. It's about Vanessa. She's been struggling, Dad. Really struggling. Her doctor says it's severe depression and anxiety. She needs a peaceful, healing environment. No stress, no complicated family dynamics. Her parents keep her calm. That's the only reason we restructured the trip. It's basically medical, Dad. You understand, right?" I stared at the manifest on my screen, at Tyler Cole's ultimate tier liquor package, while my son described this cruise as a medical necessity for his fragile, suffering wife. And in that moment I made a decision that would define everything that came afterward. I decided to play the exact role they had written for me. The clueless, generous, forgiving old fool. "Of course I understand, son," I said warmly. "Don't worry about me for 1 second. I'll be perfectly fine here at the house. You just focus on taking care of your wife. Make sure she gets the peace she needs." There was a sharp intake of breath on the line, and then I heard it. The sound of a massive weight lifting off my son's shoulders. The relief in his voice was almost sickeningly sweet. "Really, Dad, you're not mad. I was so worried you'd blow up about the money." "Not mad at all," I lied, my face a mask of stone. "A father's only job is to support his son. Go on your trip. Enjoy the ocean air. We can sort out the boring financial details whenever you get back to Portland. There's no rush." "Thank you, Dad. Seriously, you're the best. This means the world to Vanessa and me. We'll bring you back something amazing from the glaciers." "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, son," I replied. "Have a safe and memorable journey." I ended the call and watched my own hard reflection appear in the black glass of the phone. Nathan had swallowed the entire performance. He was probably walking back into his bedroom right now, flashing a victory smile at his wife, assuring her that the old man was handled. They believed they were about to embark on the most luxurious free vacation of their lives. They were catastrophically wrong. The war hadn't even begun. I was still sitting in my study an hour later, planning my first move, when my phone buzzed again. I expected another honey-coated text from Nathan. Instead, the notification carried the blue logo of my bank, an automated security alert. My brow furrowed. The alert was tied to an account I rarely looked at, because it was designed to sit dormant. A joint emergency checking account I shared with Nathan. That account was a relic from a gentler chapter of our lives. When Nathan first left for college, Eleanor had insisted we establish a financial safety net for him. Immediate, unquestioned access to funds if our only son ever faced a true crisis. A medical emergency, a car wreck at midnight, a catastrophe that couldn't wait for banking hours. I had argued against it. I believed a young man builds character by managing his own hardships. But Eleanor looked at me with those steady, uncompromising eyes of hers and said, "Walter, a child should never be one phone call away from drowning." So I deposited a very generous sum and, over the decades, kept adding to it, quietly honoring my promise to her long after Nathan had graduated, built a corporate career, and married Vanessa. The balance had grown to just over $400,000. Nathan knew the one rule: that money existed for life-altering emergencies only. In 15 years, it had never been touched. I opened the banking app and pulled up the transaction history. My eyes locked onto the most recent line items, and my heart skipped a heavy beat. 3 back-to-back cash withdrawals, executed within minutes of each other, each one for the exact same oddly specific amount, $9,900. $29,700 in raw, untraceable cash, pulled out of my emergency reserves in under an hour. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Not because of the amount, but because of the number itself. 40 years of managing construction payrolls and navigating federal banking regulations teaches you certain things. And one of them is this: nobody withdraws exactly $9,900 by coincidence. In the American banking system, any cash transaction of $10,000 or more automatically triggers a mandatory currency transaction report to the federal government. It's a law designed to catch money laundering. By keeping each withdrawal precisely $100 under that threshold, whoever took that money was deliberately engineering around federal monitoring, a calculated, illegal maneuver known as structuring. They weren't just stealing my vacation. They were extracting untraceable cash from my accounts while feeding me a sob story about depression and healing. And here is the question that kept turning in my mind like a drill bit. Why does a couple living rent-free in a $2.2 million house need $30,000 in unmarked bills? You don't pay the utility company in cash-stuffed envelopes. You don't need paper currency on a cruise where every amenity runs through a digital cabin card. Untraceable cash exists for exactly one purpose: paying for something that can never ever appear on a paper trail. My son was not merely a coward who let his wife disrespect his grieving father. He was an active participant in something darker, and every instinct I had sharpened over 40 years of contract warfare was screaming the same thing. I had to find out why, and I had to do it before that ship sailed. I closed the banking app, pushed back from the desk, and grabbed my heavy wool coat from the hallway closet. $30,000 in structured withdrawals was not a misunderstanding I could resolve over the phone. I needed to look my son in the eyes. I needed to see the truth for myself before deciding what came next. The drive from northeast Portland to the wealthy lakeside suburbs of Lake Oswego usually takes about 25 minutes down Highway 43, following the curve of the Willamette River. That morning it felt like an eternity. The rhythmic thump of my tires over the expansion joints kept time with the slow, furious drumbeat in my chest. As I wound through the tree-lined streets of Lake Oswego, the modest homes gave way to sprawling estates behind walls of manicured laurel. It is a neighborhood built for comfort and absolute security: old evergreens, private docks, lawns trimmed with surgical precision. I turned toward the cul-de-sac where Nathan and Vanessa lived, and then at the last moment I didn't. Some instinct, the same gut alarm that had saved me from a dozen crooked contractors over the decades, told me to stay invisible. I drove past their property, parked my truck 2 full blocks away, and shut off the engine. For a moment I just sat there, staring at my calloused hands on the steering wheel. Then I stepped out into the cold, damp morning and walked. The house at the end of the street was a stunning piece of modern architecture appraised at $2.2 million. I knew the appraisal to the penny, because I was the one who had bought it. When Nathan and Vanessa were newlyweds, they had complained endlessly about housing costs, about how their generation would never own anything. So I gave my only son the head start I'd had to claw out of the mud for myself. I bought the Lake Oswego estate outright, in cash. No 30-year mortgage hanging over their heads, no interest rates gnawing at their future. But my business instincts had survived my parental generosity. I never put the deed in their names. I placed the entire property into a revocable living trust. I retained full control of the asset, while they lived there completely rent-free. I even paid the property taxes and the homeowners association fees out of my own pocket year after year. All they had to do was live their lives and be decent people. And now they were using the financial freedom I had given them to steal from me. I stayed close to the tall privacy hedge along the property line, out of the sight line of the doorbell camera, and slipped through the side gate. My boots made no sound on the damp paving stones. I bypassed the grand front entrance and went to the discreet side door of the three-car garage. From my coat pocket, I drew my brass key ring and selected the silver master key. The spare I had always kept for maintenance emergencies, because a man who owns a house keeps a key to it. The deadbolt turned with a soft, well-oiled click and I stepped inside. The garage was a gleaming monument to a lifestyle they had never earned. Vanessa's white luxury SUV and Nathan's imported sports sedan sat under the lights like museum pieces, both purchased with checks I had written under the label of early inheritance gifts. The air smelled of leather polish and premium motor oil. I closed the door silently behind me and stood still in the dimness, letting my eyes adjust. The house above me was not empty. Through the ceiling I could hear the muffled rhythm of voices and footsteps. Two people moving around the upstairs master suite. Packing, most likely. I moved quietly through the garage's interior door into the mudroom, then along the back hallway toward the base of the staircase, guided by memory. I had walked every inch of this floor plan before they ever had, back when it was just studs and subfloor and possibility. I had come intending to walk in, sit them down, and demand the truth about the withdrawals. But as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard my own name float down from the upstairs bedroom, spoken in Vanessa's voice, in a tone that stopped me cold. "Walter won't know what hit him," she laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Relax, Nathan. Dr. Hale has done this before. 15,000 for the evaluation letter, 15 for the affidavit after. That's what the cash is for. No checks, no cards, nothing your father's accountant can ever trace." I stood frozen in the shadow of the stairwell, one hand braced against the wall my money had built. Nathan's voice came next, thinner, nervous. "And you're sure this holds up? Legally, I mean." "He's not actually. I mean, Dad's sharp, Vanessa. Anyone who talks to him for 5 minutes, that's why nobody's going to talk to him for 5 minutes." Vanessa cut in, her voice flat and vicious as a box cutter. "That's the whole point of the timing. Listen to me. The petition is already drafted. Emergency guardianship, declaration of incapacity. Dr. Hale's letter says early-stage cognitive decline, poor financial judgment, paranoia, self-isolation since the wife died. Your lawyer files it Tuesday, 2 days after we sail. By the time the hearing happens, we're in the middle of the ocean, completely unreachable, totally innocent. The court appoints an emergency guardian. Your father gets placed in a secure memory care facility for evaluation and control of the estate. The house, the accounts, the company money, all of it, transfers to you as his only child. When we get back from Alaska, it's done. He's warehoused and we're wealthy. And if he fights it how?" Vanessa's laugh again, brighter this time, almost delighted. "He's a 71-year-old widower who sits alone in that house talking to a picture of his dead wife. Half the neighborhood already thinks he's lost it. The isolation, the grief. Dr. Hale says it's the easiest profile there is. Nathan, look at me. In 3 weeks, that stubborn old man will be locked in a facility with a nice view, and everything he ever built will belong to us. Now finish packing and stop calling him Dad with that guilty face. He had his life. This is ours." I don't know how long I stood in the darkness at the bottom of those stairs. It might have been 30 seconds. It might have been 5 minutes. I remember the strange, weightless calm that settled over me. The same calm I felt years ago when a crane cable snapped 40 feet above my head and time slowed down to a crawl. They were not just stealing a vacation. They were not even just stealing money. My son and his wife had purchased a fraudulent medical diagnosis of cognitive decline, and they were going to use it to have me declared legally incompetent, lock me away in a facility, and seize everything I had built over 50 years of labor, while they drank champagne on a balcony I had paid for, safely out of reach in international waters. The grief I had carried for my son evaporated in that hallway, and it never came back. What remained was clarity, cold, structural, load-bearing clarity. I did not confront them. Confrontation was exactly what a desperate old man would do, and I was no longer playing that role for anyone. I retraced my steps through the mudroom and the garage, relocked the side door behind me, walked the 2 blocks to my truck through the drizzle, and sat behind the wheel, with my heart beating slow and hard, like a pile driver. They had loaded a legal gun and pointed it at my head, with a timer set for Tuesday. That gave me 6 days. And I knew exactly where to go first. I drove straight into the dense glass and steel heart of downtown Portland, pulled into the underground garage of a high-rise on Southwest 5th Avenue, and took the elevator to the 38th floor, to the offices of Marsh & Whitcomb LLP, one of the most respected and most feared trust and estate firms in the state of Oregon. The receptionist had known me for over a decade. She took one look at my face, didn't bother asking whether I had an appointment, and picked up her desk phone. 30 seconds later, the heavy door at the end of the corridor swung open, and Franklin Marsh stood in the doorway. Franklin is 68 years old, a courtroom brawler wrapped in a tailored suit, and he has been my personal attorney, my confidant, and my closest friend for 35 years. He drafted every ironclad contract that ever protected Bennett Pacific Construction from the sharks. He was the best man at my 40th wedding anniversary dinner. He was a pallbearer at Eleanor's funeral. He looked at my posture, stepped aside without a word, and closed his office door behind us until the lock clicked. His corner office looks out over the Willamette River, gray and churning that day under a low sky. He didn't offer me a drink. He walked to his desk, sat down, and fixed his sharp gray eyes on me. "You have the same look on your face you had 20 years ago when you fired your entire executive board in one afternoon," he said. "Tell me who we're destroying today." I gave him the facts, clean and unvarnished, the way I'd deliver a site report. The 6 a.m. text, the hijacked reservation and the Cole family names on my manifest, the 3 structured withdrawals of $9,900 each. And then, word for word, the conversation I had overheard from the bottom of that staircase. The corrupt physician named Hale, the cash payments for a fraudulent diagnosis, the emergency guardianship petition scheduled to be filed 2 days after their ship sailed, and my son's plan to have me warehoused in a memory care facility while my entire estate transferred into his hands. Franklin did not interrupt me once. He sat perfectly still, fingers steepled, his expression darkening sentence by sentence. When I finished, the silence in that office was thick enough to pour into forms. "I warned you, Walter," he finally said, and there was no judgment in it, only a cold professional fury. 7 years ago, when you insisted on buying that Lake Oswego property in cash and letting them live in it, I sat you down in this office and told you that placing unrestricted luxury into the hands of a weak young man with an ambitious wife was a blueprint for disaster. I told you they would eventually mistake your generosity for weakness. You were right, I said evenly. I let my grief over Eleanor blind me. I wanted to hand my son a life without struggle, and I built him into a man who thinks everything I own is already his. But I'm not here to autopsy my parenting, Franklin. I'm here because my son and his wife are trying to bury me alive. I need to know how far along they are. I need to see the weapon. Franklin swiveled to his triple monitor setup, and his fingers started flying across the keyboard. As a senior partner, he has practitioner access to the county circuit court's electronic filing system, including the pre-filing queues where attorneys stage petitions before they're formally stamped and docketed. For several minutes, the only sound in the room was the rapid clicking of keys. Then his fingers stopped. His jaw tightened and a shadow crossed his face. He clicked once, turned the monitor toward me, and the screen lit up the room. At the top of the document, in cold formal legal type, I read, "Petition for emergency guardianship and declaration of incapacity. Petitioner, Nathan W. Bennett, respondent, Walter Bennett." "They didn't just talk about it, Walter," Franklin said quietly, tapping the screen. "They paid a lawyer to build the entire weapon. It's drafted, exhibits attached, sitting in the staging queue. Look, there's already a preliminary medical affidavit implying progressive cognitive decline, signed by a physician completely outside your medical network, a doctor. Hail out of a walk-in clinic in Gresham. They've documented your grief-induced isolation as evidence of instability. And look at the scheduled filing date." His finger came down on the bottom of the screen. "Next Tuesday. Exactly 48 hours after that cruise ship clears cellular range." I stared at the clinical language on the screen. The paragraphs engineered to strip away my rights, my freedom, and my life's work while my son sipped champagne on my dime somewhere off the coast of British Columbia. They planned to come home tanned and rested, step off the ship, and inherit me like I was already dead. Franklin turned the monitor back and looked at me with a fierce, protective fire in his eyes. They've loaded the gun and pointed it at your head. If we don't dismantle this now, you could lose your freedom before the week is out. Tell me how you want to proceed. I stood, buttoned my coat, and looked out at the river for a long moment. I felt nothing for the boy I had raised. That is a terrible sentence for a father to say out loud, and I'll say more about it before this story ends. But in that moment, it was simply true. The betrayal was total. They're not dealing with a helpless old man, Franklin, I said. They're dealing with the architect who built their entire world. And an architect knows exactly which walls are load-bearing. Show me how we take the house down to the studs. Franklin leaned forward, forearms on the desk, and shifted into the tactical register that has made him the most feared trust attorney in Portland. He laid it out plainly. An emotional confrontation would be a strategic catastrophe. If I stormed into Lake Oswego demanding answers, they would instantly know the plot was exposed. They'd call their lawyer, scrub the financial trail, and possibly accelerate the petition with an emergency psychiatric hold request. No, we would operate in total silence. We would let them pack their designer luggage. We would let them board that ship on Saturday morning, convinced their trap was flawlessly set. And while they floated in the middle of the Pacific, isolated, unreachable, celebrating, we would legally dismantle their entire existence, one document at a time. The first target was the Lake Oswego estate itself. Franklin reminded me of what Nathan and Vanessa had never bothered to understand about the annoying paperwork from 7 years ago. As the sole grantor of a revocable living trust, I held absolute, unilateral authority to amend or dissolve it at any moment. I did not need Nathan's signature. I did not need Vanessa's permission. I was not even legally obligated to inform them that the roof over their heads was changing hands. The house had always been a conditional gift, and they had just proven themselves not merely unworthy of it, but dangerous. Franklin pulled a fresh stack of paper from his drawer and began drafting the formal notice of trust revocation on the spot, his pen moving through the clauses with practiced speed. The document declared the trust null and void. The entire $2.2 million property, with all its equity, reverted immediately to my sole individual name. He slid the pages across the desk with a gold pen. I looked at the signature line, and for one brief second a ghost crossed my mind. A much younger Nathan riding on my shoulders across a freshly poured foundation, laughing, pointing at the sky. But that boy was gone. In his place was a stranger who had priced my freedom at $30,000 in unmarked bills. I signed my full legal name in heavy, deliberate strokes. Franklin notarized it with a loud final click of his stamp and handed the paperwork to his senior paralegal with instructions to walk it to the county recorder's office personally before the afternoon deadline. With that single signature, Nathan and Vanessa ceased to be residents of a luxury estate. They were now unauthorized occupants of a house owned entirely by the man they were plotting to destroy. Then we moved to the second target, the joint emergency account, the same account they had used to structure their bribe money. I set my phone flat on Franklin's desk, opened my banking app, and navigated to the transfer screen while he watched as legal witness. The remaining balance glowed on the screen, just over $400,000, accumulated over decades of labor, meant to shield my family from genuine tragedy, not to finance a corrupt doctor's signature. I selected the joint account as the source. I selected my private solo account, an account that had never carried Nathan's name, as the destination. I typed in the full amount, every penny. I did not leave them $1 for the utilities. I did not leave them a dime for their car insurance. My finger hovered over the green confirmation button for one final second. I pictured Vanessa laughing in that sunlit bedroom about the easiest profile there is. I pictured a corrupt doctor signing away my freedom for cash. I pictured my own son nodding along. I pressed the button. The screen refreshed. $400,000 became zero. Franklin leaned back in his chair with a look of grim professional satisfaction and clapped his hands together once, the sharp sound echoing off the glass. You've severed their financial spine, Walter. The house is yours. The liquid cash is yours. By the time they board that ship Saturday morning, they'll be running on fumes and won't even know it. But there's one more piece before they sail. He tapped the desk, the petition. We neutralize it before their lawyer can file. and we do it in a way that doesn't just block them. It buries them. Neutralizing the petition turned out to be the most satisfying piece of legal work Franklin had done in years. His words, not mine. Over the next 2 days, we built the counterfile. First, Franklin arranged for me to undergo a comprehensive independent neuropsychological evaluation at the state's most respected medical center. 3 hours of cognitive testing administered by 2 board-certified specialists, videotaped from start to finish with my full consent. I sat in that clinic and solved puzzles, recalled word lists, drew clock faces, and calculated compound interest in my head faster than the young resident could check my answers. The final report, signed by both physicians, stated in plain clinical language that Walter Bennett demonstrated cognitive performance in the superior range for his age group, with fully intact judgment, memory, and financial capacity. Second, Franklin drafted a sworn declaration documenting everything. The timeline, the structured withdrawals matching the amounts I'd overheard, the pre-staged petition sitting in the filing queue, and the identity of the physician who had signed a medical affidavit about a man he had never met, never examined, and never spoken to. Every exhibit was cross-referenced, notarized, and ready. And third, the part that turned defense into demolition. Franklin prepared a formal referral package for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and the State Medical Board. Conspiracy to commit elder fraud through the courts, bribery of a licensed physician, and bank structuring in violation of federal law. The package would be transmitted the moment their lawyer formally filed the petition. If he filed nothing, the referral would go out anyway the following week. Either way, Dr. Hale's medical license was already dead. He just didn't know it yet. They built a trap that only works if you're isolated, uninformed, and unrepresented, Franklin said, sliding the finished binder into his safe. You are now the single most documented, most lawyered, most certified sane 71-year-old in the state of Oregon. Their petition isn't a weapon anymore, Walter. It's a signed confession with a court stamp on it. There was one more call to make before Saturday, and I made it myself from the cab of my truck, parked with a view of the river. I called the cruise line's guest accounting department, identified myself as the account holder and original purchaser of the reservation, and calmly informed them that I was removing my platinum card as the payment method for all onboard expenses, effective immediately. The fare itself was paid and non-refundable. Fine. Let them sail. But every drink, every spa treatment, every satellite internet minute, every helicopter tour from the moment they stepped aboard would now require the remaining passengers to present their own valid credit cards to the ship's purser. The accounting specialist typed for a moment, then read me a formal disclosure confirming that my financial liability was terminated and that the remaining guests would be presented with a zero balance folio and no stored payment method upon boarding. I thanked her for her efficiency and ended the call. A cold smile crossed my face for the first time in days. The snare was set, and the bait was too magnificent for them to refuse. Saturday morning arrived with the crisp, damp chill of early spring in the Pacific Northwest. I had been awake since before dawn, drinking black coffee at my kitchen table, reviewing the timeline one last time. By 8 o'clock, I was parked in an elevated lot, overlooking the cruise terminal on the Portland waterfront, where the massive white hull of the ship dominated the shoreline, preparing to cast off for Alaska. The terminal was a hive of taxis, shuttle buses, and rolling luggage. I sat in my truck with a pair of compact binoculars on the console, though I hardly needed them. Nathan has always been aggressively punctual when it comes to his own pleasure. Right on schedule, a black premium SUV glided up to the VIP drop-off lane. Nathan stepped out first, dressed in crisp nautical resort wear, looking relaxed and utterly carefree. Vanessa followed, her face hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses, waving imperiously at the driver to handle her wall of matching luggage. Then came Roger and Carol Cole, moving with the smug deliberateness of people who believed they had finally arrived at the life they deserved. And bouncing out last was Tyler, wearing a loud tropical shirt that looked absurd in the cold Oregon wind, already miming a toast to no one. They stood together on the pavement, laughing loudly, wrapped in unearned certainty. They handed their bags to the porters and swept toward the VIP entrance, expecting my loyalty status to smooth every step. I picked up my tablet and opened a social media app under the anonymous profile I'd created months ago to keep up with the family updates Nathan always forgot to share. Vanessa had already posted a filtered photograph of the group in front of the ship, captioned, "Embarking on our much-needed, hard-earned luxury vacation. Time to leave all the stress behind and pamper ourselves." A champagne glass emoji punctuated it. Hard-earned. The sheer delusion required to type that word after financing a fraudulent medical kidnapping with structured cash was almost artistic. I watched them disappear through the glass doors into the fast-track security queue. Then I sat patiently for another 2 hours as the endless stream of passengers boarded, until the loading ramps retracted, the mooring lines dropped from the pylons, and a deep vibration rolled across the water as the engines fired. The horn sounded, one long, triumphant blast that rattled my windows, and the colossal white vessel pulled slowly away from the dock, churning the river into foam, its bow swinging toward the open ocean. Within hours, they would lose all cellular service. They would be entirely dependent on the ship's exorbitant satellite internet, a premium service they no longer had any means to pay for. Perfectly isolated, perfectly suspended, perfectly cut off from their lawyer, their bank, and the reality collapsing behind them on shore. I put the truck in gear and drove straight back downtown, because Franklin was waiting for me in his firm's boardroom, and seated across from him was a man named Anthony Reyes. Anthony runs one of the largest private real estate acquisition firms in the Northwest. I had known him professionally for 20 years. His crews had subcontracted under Bennett Pacific on a dozen commercial jobs. He buys distressed and off-market luxury properties in cash, guts them, remodels them, and flips them at a premium. He is fast, ruthless, and completely allergic to sentiment, which made him the perfect buyer. His legal team had spent 2 days verifying the newly unencumbered status of the Lake Oswego estate. They knew they were acquiring a $2.2 million property at a 20% discount in exchange for speed and zero contingencies. And they were eager to close before I changed my mind. There were no pleasantries in that boardroom. There was a thick stack of closing documents, and there was a pen. I read the binding clauses carefully. The language was clean and unforgiving. The sale was strictly, irrevocably as is. The buyer assumed total ownership of the physical property and the complete entirety of its current contents, every piece of custom furniture, every designer handbag, every set of titanium golf clubs. Anthony's crews were authorized to breach the property and commence full clear-out at 8 o'clock the next morning. I signed my name on the final line and slid the documents across the polished table. Anthony reviewed the signatures, nodded to his lead attorney, and keyed an authorization sequence into a secure token from his jacket pocket. We sat in silence. Less than 3 minutes later, my phone lit up with a priority alert from my bank. An incoming wire of $1.76 million had cleared and settled into my private account. Fully secured, completely irreversible. Anthony stood, shook my hand with a grip like a pipe clamp, and walked out with his team to dispatch the crews. I stood alone at the boardroom window with Franklin, looking out over the river. The mansion, the physical monument to their arrogance, no longer belonged to my son. Their cars, their wardrobes, every object they had ever preened over was now, legally, someone else's demolition debris, and the 2 people responsible were trapped on a floating island in the North Pacific, powerless to stop any of it. "How long before they figure it out?" Franklin asked. I checked my watch. "The ship's billing system updates when they clear into open water," I said. "So, right about now." That evening I sat in the quiet comfort of my living room, a fire burning low in the hearth, a cup of black coffee steaming on the side table. The house felt different. Not empty anymore, just calm. Hundreds of miles away, swallowed by the freezing expanse of the North Pacific, my son and his wife were beginning to experience the undeniable mathematics of their choices. Here is something most people don't know about the luxury cruise industry. It runs on a completely cashless model. The moment you step aboard, physical currency becomes useless. Every transaction, premium dining, spa treatments, satellite internet, top-shelf liquor, runs exclusively through a digital cabin card, and that card must be backed by a valid active credit account. I had severed that lifeline with one phone call. Right on schedule, my phone began to vibrate on the coffee table. Cut off from cellular towers, they were reduced to the ship's weak, crackling emergency satellite line, and the frantic voicemails they left on my phone that evening were, despite the static, remarkably clear in their panic. I took a slow sip of coffee, leaned back in my armchair, and played the first message. It was Nathan, and he did not sound like a man who had recently signed documents to erase his father. He sounded terrified, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. A massive, humiliating misunderstanding had just occurred at the main champagne lounge. Vanessa, flanked by her entire family, had marched up to the bar and loudly ordered a $500 bottle of vintage champagne to toast the beginning of their vacation. The bartender swiped her cabin card and politely informed her the transaction was declined. She demanded he run it again, announcing to a lounge full of wealthy strangers that the account was backed by an unlimited platinum line. He ran it again, then a third time. Then the head purser arrived and informed her, with professional coldness, that the funding source for the entire cabin had been explicitly and permanently revoked by the account holder. Nathan begged me to call the cruise line and fix what he assumed was a banking error. He mentioned that Vanessa's parents were mortified by the public scene. I let the message end and played the second, left exactly 40 minutes later. The confusion in Nathan's voice was gone, replaced by raw, suffocating panic. He had gone to guest services to buy a satellite internet package, $100 a day, so he could log into his banking app and transfer funds to save face. He'd handed the purser his debit card, the one tied to our joint emergency account. Declined, insufficient funds. He was frantic now, demanding to know how an account holding $400,000 could read zero, begging me to call the bank, pleading with me to report a catastrophic fraud. He actually had the audacity to ask me to protect the very money he had budgeted for my legal execution. The third voicemail was the most revealing, because it wasn't Nathan, it was Vanessa. The silken superiority was gone. She was weeping into the receiver. Her family was turning on her. Tyler was throwing a screaming tantrum in the corridor because his cabin card wouldn't buy him a single drink, and 10 days of involuntary sobriety stretched out before him like a prison sentence. They had been barred from every specialty restaurant on the ship. No valid payment method, and relegated to the crowded complimentary buffet lines with the coach-class passengers her parents had spent the whole morning sneering at. She sobbed that her mother wasn't speaking to her. She asked, she demanded, that I fix it, as if disrespect were a service I still provided. I finished my coffee, set the phone to silent, and went to bed. I slept better than I had in 3 years. The next morning at 8 o'clock sharp, Anthony's crews breached the Lake Oswego property, and over the following 3 days they stripped it with industrial efficiency. Every closet, every drawer, every garage shelf, down to the bare studs, exactly as the as-is contract permitted. I never went to watch. I didn't need to. Instead, I spent those 10 days doing something I hadn't done in years, living. I walked the river trail in the mornings. I had long dinners with Franklin and his wife. I visited Eleanor's grave and sat with her for a full afternoon, and for the first time since she passed, I talked to her without apologizing. I also made one final hire. His name is Samuel Grant, a retired police detective turned licensed private investigator whom Franklin's firm keeps on permanent retainer. Samuel's assignment was simple. Document the homecoming. Legally, publicly, from a distance with timestamps. If Nathan and Vanessa ever tried to claim in court that they were victims of some fraudulent scheme, I wanted an unimpeachable professional record of exactly what they did, and said the day reality arrived. On the morning the ship returned, Samuel was parked near the terminal, with a camera and an open phone line to me. I was not there. I was somewhere better, and I'll tell you where in a moment. Through my earpiece, Samuel narrated the disembarkation in the flat, precise voice of a man who has written 10,000 police reports. He told me Vanessa came down the gangway looking unrecognizable, the curated socialite facade completely collapsed, wearing the same wrinkled designer sweatpants she'd boarded in, her face pale, her hair in a chaotic knot. Roger and Carol Cole radiated a furious, toxic silence and refused to even look at Nathan. Tyler, 10 days sober against his will, paced the terminal exit shivering in his tropical shirt. They had spent the entire cruise trapped in their cabins, eating buffet food, tearing each other apart over whose fault the banking error was, still convinced that one aggressive phone call from shore would restore their world. Between the 5 of them, Samuel reported, they scraped together about $80 in crumpled bills, barely enough for a single economy taxi van to Lake Oswego. They crammed themselves in with their mountain of designer luggage, knees pressed together, and Nathan spent the ride loudly promising his father-in-law that everything would be resolved within the hour, that it was a clerical error, And, that first thing, tomorrow morning, he would march down to the courthouse, file the guardianship petition, have his father declared incompetent, and take permanent control of the family fortune. He was planning my legal execution from the back seat of a taxi he could barely afford. Samuel followed at a professional distance. The ride took 45 minutes. The quiet, tree-lined streets of their exclusive neighborhood looked exactly as they always had. Right up until the taxi rolled to a stop in front of the familiar double lot, and the world inside that van went silent. The property no longer looked like a multi-million-dollar sanctuary. It looked like an active commercial construction zone. The manicured lawn Vanessa had policed with religious ferocity was scarred with deep diesel tire tracks. A massive red commercial real estate sign stood planted in the yard with one word across it in huge white letters, Solge. The custom-crafted front doors were gone, replaced by sheets of raw plywood, chained shut with commercial padlocks. The bay windows were sheeted in plastic, prepped for gut remodeling. The house was dark, hollow, and stripped of every trace of domestic life. But the true horror was waiting at the curb. Stacked where the trash bins normally sat on collection day was a mountain of heavy black industrial garbage bags, seams splitting, spilling the ruins of their entire financed lifestyle onto the wet pavement. A bent titanium golf club jutted from one bag. An imported silk dress soaked up rainwater from another. Anthony's crew had followed the Az's clause to the letter, and someone on that crew with a poet's instinct had planted a hand-painted cardboard sign on top of the pile. It read, "Free to take," Samuel narrated, as Nathan dropped his leather travel bag on the sidewalk and took 2 shaking steps toward the garbage, his mind visibly unable to process the image. Vanessa let out a guttural scream that echoed down the quiet street, and Roger and Carol Cole stood behind the idling taxi, staring at their son-in-law with pure disgust, finally understanding that the golden goose their daughter had married was a broke, homeless fraud. They ordered a separate taxi, Samuel reported, and left the two of them standing on the curb in the drizzle without a word. While that curbside collapse was unfolding in Lake Oswego, I was nowhere near it. I was seated in a plush leather armchair in the first-class lounge at Portland International Airport, the noise of the terminal muted behind thick glass, sipping a perfectly brewed espresso and watching jetliners taxi across the wet tarmac. I had booked a long overdue trip to a quiet, sun-drenched island in the Caribbean, because after 50 years of building for other people, I had decided I finally deserved to rest. Samuel concluded his report and ended our call. My phone sat dark on the glass table beside my espresso for several long minutes. I knew exactly what was happening on the other end of the city. Nathan would be cycling through the stages of panic, hammering at his frozen banking apps, calling the number on that big red Solge sign, discovering that the corporate buyer had no obligation to speak with him and no idea who he was. And when every single door had slammed shut, he would call the one man he had plotted to lock away. Right on cue, the screen lit up. Nathan's name. I did not answer immediately. I let it ring 5 full times. I wanted the terror of his ruin to fully saturate before he heard my voice. On the 6th ring, I picked up and said nothing. "Dad!" Nathan screamed into the phone, his voice cracking into a register I had never heard from him. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Where are you? The house is boarded up. There are chains on our doors. Some construction company threw everything we own into garbage bags on the street. My bank accounts are empty. The emergency fund is wiped out. My cards are declining. The cruise line humiliated us. Vanessa's parents just abandoned us on the sidewalk. You have to call the bank. You have to call the police. Someone stole our identity. Someone stole the house. Dad, you have to do something right now." In the background, I could hear traffic, and beneath it, the continuous, breathless sound of Vanessa sobbing. Not the sound of heartbreak, but of pure material loss. Nathan was hyperventilating, still clinging to the fantasy that this was all a catastrophic mistake, still playing the innocent son waiting for his wealthy father to swoop in. I took one slow breath and let his panic hang in the static between us. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, quiet, and absolutely level. "I don't have dementia, son," I said, enunciating every syllable. But I did have a life-altering moment of clarity. The silence that fell over the line was absolute. Even Vanessa's wailing choked to a halt. I could feel the weight of those words land on him, the sudden, vertiginous understanding that I knew everything. I didn't wait for him to assemble a lie. I laid out the architecture of his new existence, beam by beam. "I sold the house, Nathan. I revoked the trust the same day you sat in that bedroom and priced a fraudulent diagnosis at $30,000 in structured cash. I liquidated the entire Lake Oswego property to a corporate buyer in a strictly as-is transaction, which means every piece of furniture, every handbag, every golf club legally became the demolition crew's property. I instructed them to treat your possessions exactly like what you proved yourselves to be, and the accounts you're crying about. I drained them. Every cent of my money now sits in an account that has never carried your name. You are broke, you are homeless, and you are permanently severed from the wealth you believed you were entitled to steal. Dad, please, he whimpered, his voice shrinking to a broken whisper. You can't do this to us. You gave us that house. It was ours. It was a revocable trust, I corrected him gently. You never once asked what that word meant. You should have. We have nowhere to sleep tonight. We don't have money for a hotel. We don't even have money for food. You have to help us. We're your family. You stopped being my family, I said, the moment you decided a memory care facility was an acceptable retirement plan for your father. But since you mentioned food, the buffet on the ship was complimentary, wasn't it? Consider that my last gift. Vanessa started screaming in the background, begging me to forgive them. I ignored her and delivered the final blow. One more thing, Nathan. Franklin sent a complete copy of your incapacity petition, along with Dr. Hale's affidavit and the structured withdrawal records, to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and the State Medical Board. Conspiracy to commit elder fraud is a federal matter. I strongly suggest you use whatever loose change is left in your pockets to hire a defense attorney. You're going to need a good one. He made a choked, horrifying sound that I will remember for the rest of my life, and I ended the call, picked up my travel bag, and walked to my gate to begin my new life. Now, before I board that flight, let me sit with you for a few more minutes, because if all you take from this story is the satisfaction of watching entitled people lose everything, then I've wasted your time. And mine. I've had months on a warm island to think about how a boy who once fell asleep on my shoulder grew into a man who tried to have me erased. And here is the hardest thing I have ever had to admit. I helped build it, not the cruelty, that was theirs. But the entitlement? I poured that foundation myself, one unearned gift at a time. Every time Nathan hit an obstacle, I bought the obstacle and had it hauled away. I confused providing with parenting. I thought I was giving him a head start, when what I was actually giving him was the unshakable belief that my life's work was a warehouse he could draw from forever, and that I was just the aging night watchman standing between him and the inventory. Eleanor saw it long before I did. She used to tell me, Walter, if you hand a man everything, don't be surprised when he starts to believe you owe it to him. I dismissed it as her being old-fashioned. She was simply right. Generosity without boundaries doesn't create gratitude, it creates appetite. And appetite, left unchecked long enough, will eventually look at the giver himself and see nothing but one last thing to consume. So if you are a parent listening to this, and I know many of you are, hear me clearly. Loving your children does not mean removing every stone from their path. It means teaching them how to carry weight, because character is a muscle, and muscles only grow under load. Give them your time before your money. Give them your standards before your assets. And if you do give with your eyes open, with clear boundaries, and with the paperwork done right, because the same law that protected me can protect you. And to those of you on the other side of this story, the elderly among us, the widowed, the ones sitting in quiet houses being slowly written off by the people you raised, your grief is not a diagnosis. Your solitude is not incompetence. Your age is not a liability, no matter how many times someone tells you it is. Elder financial abuse almost never begins with strangers. It begins at the family table, in soft voices, framed as concern. It's for your own good, you'd only be tired, let us handle it. Learn the warning signs, keep your own counsel, keep your own attorney, and never ever let anyone convince you that being loved requires being erased. As for Nathan, people ask me if I regret it. The honest answer is that I grieve, but I do not regret. There's a difference. I grieve the boy on my shoulders. I do not regret protecting myself from the man he chose to become. Forgiveness may come someday, on my terms and on my timeline, but forgiveness and access are two different things, and the second one is closed permanently. Respect is the one currency I no longer lend. If this story reached something in you, if you've ever been treated like a wallet instead of a person by the people you sacrificed for, do me a favor. Share your story in the comments, because someone reading it tonight needs to know they're not alone. Hit that like button if you believe respect is earned in both directions, and subscribe to my channel because there are more stories like this one to tell. True-to-life stories about dignity, boundaries, and the quiet strength of people the world tried to write off. Your support genuinely keeps my channel going, and I read every comment myself. Every story shared on my channel is written, edited, and narrated with human hands and a human heart, drawn from real experiences, real letters from viewers, and real patterns of life that too many families will recognize. Names, places, and identifying details are changed to protect privacy, and some events are dramatized for storytelling. But the lessons are real, because the pain that inspires them is real. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of the people who take care of you, and guard your dignity like the treasure it is.